Easy is actually not with us this week on the Any Given Runday podcast. He is in the middle of last minute prep. We were trying to get a guest on this week, but then I knew he had a lot going on leading up to he's moving to Dubai in a couple of weeks and he has to tie up some loose ends on that one. So he might talk in the intro of next week's podcast when we will have him back and hopefully have a guest on the show as well. But he's not here today, but that doesn't mean you're going to have 45 minutes to listen to me on this week's episode of the podcast. So it's definitely a lot more valuable information in it than that. But before we get into this week's episode, I just want to say a few thank yous. Thank you to everyone who sent messages last week. I know I've definitely said this before in the podcast, but last week, especially with Anthony O'Brien's episode, I don't think we've ever got as much positive feedback from an episode through different text messages and mainly Instagram DMs on that one. And just a lot of people that really enjoyed that week's episode of the podcast. We've noticed over pretty much from the summer and always leading around Dublin Marathon, we get a spike in listenership. The Dublin Marathon episode, we did the preview of it with Kevin English was our most popular episode of the year. Because we get those Spotify rap things they do. They also do that for podcasts. So we're able to see that our listenership went up 255%, which is unbelievable. Our streams of Spotify went up 387%. Like just bananas numbers for us. So we can't thank you enough for that, especially that we see a lot of people are sharing it through WhatsApp and their stories and everything. And there's a lot of shares in last week's episode in particular. So thank you for that one. So what I wanted to do for this week's episode, rather than just listen to me ramble for 40 minutes, and because of how we've had a big boom in our listenership over the last couple of months, that I wanted to show clips of previous episodes earlier in the year that you may not have listened to. So for our newer listeners, this one could be very beneficial. It's just around 10-15 minutes clips. I tried to make them as different as I could, so you're not hearing the same topics, different conversations throughout it. So you'll have a talk on ice baths and different temperatures for ice baths. And it's not just, load of ice into the water and how you should be moving in it, right? Because if you stay still, somehow you're warmer, which didn't make sense to me as time that you'll hear on that. We get to talk about recovering from injury as well. But we're going to kick it off with a short clip from Anthony Fennelly on the podcast. And the reason I chose this one is because we found out this week that there won't be an Ironman in Youghal next year. And this was, I don't want to say one of Anthony's favourite races because he had a love-hate relationship with the race that you're going to find out in a couple of minutes. He's definitely had lots of ups and downs. But spoiler alert, because this was before August, where he finally accomplished his Ironman goal and had a great day out this year doing it. Whereas you're about to hear why he may not have had a great day out the previous two times he tried in 2019 and 2022. So that's enough talking from me. It's straight into Anthony Fennelly when he joined us in the podcast back in April 3rd, 2023. Enjoy. But just when you talk about your mental toughness there and bike and suffering, I don't know I'm going to bring up a bad thing for you or a good thing for you, but I have to bring up the Ironman in Cork last year. And this was, am I right in saying this was your first Ironman you were training for? No, this wasn't the first one.
No, this has been my was my fifth Ironman.
That was your fifth Ironman, but this is the one with the bike.
So this one with the bike, what I want to, sorry bud, hey, come here you. Sorry guys. What I want to say is, right, that Ironman in Youghal.
Yes.
Me and Youghal have serious unfinished business. And when I say that, I done Youghal in 2019 when the heavens opened, right? The swim was cancelled, right? If they put anybody into the sea that day, they didn't have enough lifeboats to take them out, right? So the swim was cancelled and we started on the bike. Alistair Brownlee won that Ironman that day. The bike for me that day was absolute hell on earth. I got on the bike, that's 2019. Now I got on the bike, I had a pain in my back from standing in the cold for nearly 3.5 hours, and it was lashing rain. So we got on the bike, we were just heading out onto the course, and the course director said, it'll probably be one loop, lads, so give it socks, right? So think about it, I was thinking, right, we're going to do 90k, right? Yeah. So I went and I gave it everything in that 90k. We went out of Youghal and down the Ballymacoda Road, and the water was 2 feet deep going down the Ballymacoda Road. Like, it was just spraying back on top of us, right? So I was coming back into y'all after the first loop, thinking, right, I'm going on the run. And next one I was waved on, carry on, right? So I had a cry. I physically had a cry on the bike thinking, you have to be joking me here. I've literally the legs and gave it everything on the first cycle, on the first loop. And I was told, right, you got to keep going. But sure, look, you just have to refocus and go again. So off I went, and I was coming back into y'all at about 20k to go, I'd say. Not even, maybe 15k to go, and my chain snapped.
Right?
That's in 2019. My chain snapped. It cost me about an hour and 20 minutes, right? So, and why that happened was I had no spare link, right? I'm not going to lie, I've never fixed a chain in my life, right? So it's never happened to me, right? Basically what happened was a stone got caught between the cog and the chain, and it snapped the links of the chain, basically, because the weather was so bad. And that was fine. I pulled in, sat on the side of the road, literally thinking that's it, you know? And was there, and out of panic, I took the chain off the bike, thinking, right, how do I fix it? And this guy came along, he stopped, in fairness to him, and he said, I have a link. He said, I have no idea how to fix it. He said, I have a link and I have a link changer. You can have it if you want it, right? In the end, right, I got it on, but it cost me a good hour and a bit, right? But it was only hanging on by a thread. So it got me back into y'all. I had to push the bike up Windmill Hill, right? But it got me back to the run, right? But it killed me on the day because I was completely hypothermic, being cold, standing there for nearly an hour and a bit, stopped. And then obviously went on to the run. And on the run then was hell on earth, to be honest. I don't remember the last 10 kilometres of the run whatsoever.
My God.
Yeah.
And that was your introduction to Ironmans. That's...
I'm going to be honest, I've never once carried a link for a chain. I've never
thought about
considered it. No.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? Like, I haven't either until then. I do now. But, 1 second.
That's a horrible lesson to learn during that time.
Yeah.
Of all the times to learn, you need a link in the chain and learning how, in the middle of your first Ironman, probably one of the worst conditions ever in Cork for that Ironman.
They reckon it was one of the hardest Ironman to ever do with the conditions, you know. Some of the pros pulled out halfway through. Some of the pros didn't even bother starting the race. The rain was so heavy.
But the rain was heavy and you're not doing the swim. Did you have it? I remember thinking about that. Like, did you ever think, I'm not doing this because if I finish this, I didn't technically do an Ironman for not doing a swim? Or you're like, I'm in it now. That's it.
That was the I suppose that was the joke that went down for 3 years because of COVID.
Yeah.
Like, you never finished the one in y'all, or, you know, that type of and like that's always thrown at you. Do you know what I mean? Like, but so like obviously with COVID, then everything was kicked back. You know what I mean? Like, and but to be fair, what I did find, and the only good thing with COVID was my training ramped up and my running went through the roof. You know, and my times on my runs and stuff like that just went to another level. You know what I mean? So in one sense, it was a good thing, you know, because I was able to put in the time to improve that area. You know what I mean? Like, but what I will say is, like, that Ironman in y'all in 2019, it literally could have killed me.
Yeah.
You know?
I remember seeing the footage and watching Brownlee running in that rain and like waterlogged.
Yeah,
absolutely waterlogged.
The picture of myself and my mother at the finish line. I'm roaring crying, and she's giving me a hug. And to be honest about it, I don't remember it, you know. But it's an amazing picture. I have it up in my gym. It's an amazing picture of me and my mother. But I remember my brother ran alongside me for the last kind of 6-7K. No recollection whatsoever of him being alongside me. And I was giving out to him, telling him hurry up. You know what I mean? Like he's never ran a day in his life, by the way. He's big into lifting weights.
Yeah.
And I don't have any recollection of finishing that race at all, you know. So that's why the race in 2022 was going to be the one I was going to kind of put you all...
The comeback tour.
Yes. But that was not a shit show. You know, that didn't go my way either. And that's where the bike story comes into play now. You know what I mean? Like, And that was completely, like, it was like chalk and cheese, because like that was 31, 32 degrees that day, you know? So like,
which is unheard of really for Ireland.
Oh, completely. Like, it was madness. Like I'll never forget, I went down to watch the half, because they'd done the half and the full in the one weekend. And I had a friend of mine, Seán Hennessy, he's involved with Cork Tri Club, and he was running in the half on the Saturday. And I went down to that. I'm never forgetting thinking, I need to get out of the sun. You know, it was absolutely sweltering. I've never experienced heat like it in Ireland, to be honest. And I lived in the Middle East, in Doha, and it was like that. It was genuinely as hot as that.
And here's me booking ones for Portugal.
You know what, though? The ones abroad are amazing. When you race abroad, it's amazing. You know what I mean? Like, definitely. Like, I want to do more races abroad, you know. It's great to get away with the crew and have the crack and use it as a holiday, as well as, you know, your race. You're there for a reason as well, you know.
After y'all in 2019, then, well, your next few Ironmans, they were abroad.
So no, so we done. There was no race, and then obviously, so the next Ironman with 2020
was 2022. It was in Cork,
and that's the one you asked me about with the situation. I'll tell you that story. That's an amazing story, to be honest. As I said, I done the swim. In, I think it was 1:18. Absolutely buzzing coming out of the water. Everything was on par, right? That's what I was hoping to anything under 120, and I was happy. So came out number 118. I was absolutely over the moon. Got on the bike, done the first loop in about 3 hours, which is seriously
pretty good.
Yeah. And I came to Windmill Hill, and it was like, what's going on here? I came to Windmill Hill the first time, and I got a puncture at the bottom of the hill. My tire. But I'll tell you a story, right? I changed the tire, right? Emer was with me the night before the race, and she said to me, there's a nick in the back of your tire. And I was like, don't be telling me that now, you know? So I went down to Wheelworks, they were on site, and I said it to the lads at Wheelworks, and they goes, look, we'll just change the tire. I don't know, 120 or whatever maybe. I said, dude, change the tire. So they changed the tire anyway, and they racked my bike for me. So that was fine. Got on the bike after the swim, went off, and I came around the bend. So when you come to Windmill Hill, it comes across it brings up a laneway, and then across a kind of little tiny lane, and then you come into the crowd and you go up the hill, you know. And right at the bottom of the hill, there's actually a video on my Instagram of me coming up the hill with the flat wheel, right? The wheel went completely flat at the bottom of the hill, right? And the crowd was so amazing that I wasn't stopping. You know, I was getting off that saddle, right? And I went up the hill on the flat, and you could see the struggle, but I was like, I'm not getting off the bike. So got to the very top, and when I got to the top, we're down the bend, and I said, right, I'll fix the wheel. Jumped off, and to be fair, there was a couple of guys from Striker. They work with my brother in Striker, and they seen me, and they came over, and they actually gave me a hand to change the tire. So we whipped it on fairly quick, and I was gone, right? So that was fine. We came back around, and it was roughly in the same place that my chain snapped in 2019. And I'm not joking, right? I reckon it was within a half a kilometre of the same place, right? And I came around the bend, and my tire exploded, right?
Oh, Jesus.
So I obviously done damage to the tire going up the hill on when it was flat. So I came around the bend, and the tire exploded. So I kept going, and I said, right, can I get home, right? But I was never getting home on the rim. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's a funny story, because the bike I used on the day is actually my brother-in-law Paul Hunt's bike, because my TT got damaged the week before the race. So he said, look, you can use my bike, right? So I came around, and the wheel went, and I tried to cycle on it for about 2 or 3K, but I was on the rim, basically.
It's not your bike. Keep going.
I was wrecking the rim, right? Right. But I got to the point where I was like, I can't. There's no way I can continue this. So literally, there was a family out, and they were spraying us down with water and all that kind of stuff, because the families in Youghal are amazing, and around the course they were all amazing, like out with water because it was so hot. And I just pulled in. I said, lads, have you got a bike? And the woman goes, what? She goes, I goes, have you got a bike? I said, my wheel is gone. I said, I can't finish the race on that bike. I said, have you got a bike? And she goes, hang on a second, I have something in the shed. So she comes out with this like
pink streamers, tricycle.
a woman's kind of a lady's mountain bike with a baby seat on the back, right?
Oh God!
And I was like, I can't take that. I said, I can't use that. She goes, that's all I have. She goes, give me a second. I'll ring the neighbour. So she rang the neighbour, and the neighbour was, I don't know, maybe a kilometre down the road or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So I was waiting. I was actually hiding behind the gate in case anybody came along. You know what I mean? Like the rolling road. Or I was panicking that was going to catch me. Do you know what I mean? Because I was there so long. And they came up with this kid's mountain bike, right? And I'm not joking when I say this heavy steel kid's mountain bike, right? With like the bull bar kind of horn bars, you know?
Yeah.
And the kind of the pressy kind of gears. You have to clip the gears, you know what I mean? And I looked at the thing thinking, you have to be joking me here, right? So I took the sticker off the back of my bike and I stuck it onto that. Now, if Ironman see this, they'll probably take the medal back off me. But that's the way it went, right? But I was getting back to that transition no matter what happened, right? So, but the mad thing was, I was in cleats. So I had to say,
this thing a normal pedal.
I need your runners. Because I can't get on that in cleats. I said, I need your runners, right? So we came around anyway the bend, and I got on the bike anyway, and it was, I said, about 25k to go, and it was hell. It was harder than the first 150, 160k, the last 25k.
Yes.
That's the one I was on. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I wasn't even up to my hip. Do you know that? Do you know what I mean? But so we jumped on. I jumped on the bike and off I went and got back into Youghal. And obviously the dreaded Windmill Hill was there. So all my family, I'd warned my family, I said, be on the hill. I said, I want videos of me on the hill, right? That's what I want, right? Because they missed me the first time round. They said, we thought you'd be a bit longer, you know, but the cycle was so good the first time round that I was actually ahead of the game and they missed me. So they were all on the hill and there was some at the bottom, some in the middle and some at the top to get good videos, right? And next minute I came around the bend and I jumped off this bike, right? Because I was getting up the hill on it, by the way, right? And I started pushing it. And I see Paul Hunt's face on the right-hand side of the hill. And he was like in shock. And I just shouted at him, don't fucking open your mouth. I ran past him with the bike, right? And everyone was in shock looking at me stupid saying, like,
what's he doing?
Where's his bike?
Where's his bike?
The guy that was on Windmill Hill doing the commentary, there was like a big archway that we had to go under. And as I was coming to the hill, he kind of looked at me thinking, he said, you did not do 170k on that bike. You know? I was thinking, I'm done here. He's going to pull me out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would have been better off on my own bike. So like, it wasn't that you're cheating, but like, it was either take the kid's mountain bike or not finish the race.
Yeah.
Person, I'm getting to that finish line no matter what happens. You know what I mean? Like that medal is going around my neck, whether I have to crawl, walk. Do you know what I mean? Like, because all my family and friends are at that finish line and I'm not letting anybody down. That's what's in my head when I'm racing. You know what I mean? So I just put my head down anyway and they were all screaming running and I just ran past them, right? Got back to transition and went into transition, just thrown the bike in, didn't want anyone to kind of see it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
My legs were so shot. When I went into the tent, I went to sit down and I fell backwards over the chair. I was gone. Like, I was like, how am I going to do this marathon? You know what I mean? And I would run a decent marathon. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's my strong point is running. And so off I came anyway, out of the tent. And I swear, man, lads, the first 8-10K, I was in so much pain. I'll never forget. I genuinely thought in my head, there's no way I can run 42k. Like, my legs were completely shot. But what I will say is, once I got through that period, everything started coming around, and I started getting my rhythm and getting into back into what I would normally run. But obviously, it did have a big impact on me, on my time and stuff like that because of what went on. But I have to say, I loved every minute of it. You know what I mean? It's an amazing story, right? But there was nothing stopping me getting to that finish line.
I'm absolutely sweating after listening to that story. Never mind doing my own one. Jesus.
Yeah. You know,
like how So whose bike are you taking this year?
I'm back on my own bike if it lasts. Because there's no way in the world Paul Hunt will give me his bike again.
I don't think so.
He's getting punched on the left, right, and centre, actually. And he's getting punched on the left, right, and centre since I give it back to him. He's constantly blaming me.
he might have a bit of a case there.
Yeah, I jinxed that bike. But yeah, like what I have to say about y'all though, lads, if you're going to do a triathlon or do an Ironman, get down and do y'all before they finish it. You know what I mean? It is absolutely sensational. And the crowds, the atmosphere in all the different towns between like Ballinacota, Garryvoe, Middleton, you know, and y'all itself. It's something to behold. It's amazing, to be honest.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's one. I know a lot of people are using it as a half. A lot of people I know are talking to are going to do the half down there. They use it, and then like that they go abroad for the big one. They use the big one as the holiday type or the end of season type race. But yeah, no, it's definitely one that's on the radar, and like that they could end it soon enough.
Yeah, as I said, they got it for the 3 more years, but like, you know, what'll happen after that, we don't know, you know. But like, it's definitely one of the best races, whether it be marathons, triathlons, or whatever. It's definitely one of the best races I've ever done. The atmosphere is just incredible.
And before we move on to our next clip, I just want to give a shout out to Anthony, Seán, and everyone else at Team Pro Racing Cork who were down in Valencia this weekend doing a marathon. Hope you got on great doing that. I've seen some guys put up pictures of it. It looked like a phenomenal event. We had another guest this year's episode podcast, Brandon Dowd. He is Kildare Sports Massage on Instagram. He also did Valencia. He did something like 3 hours 20. He said it's a great one for getting your PB, that course. So it looked pretty cool. I think I might have to put that one on the bucket list as well, but we move on for now. So in this next clip, we're going to be talking to Karen from Sealieve.ie. Karen talks about her journey with cold war therapy over 6 years ago and how she's very active. She's done a couple of triathlons. She's climbed Kilimanjaro. And she credits a lot of this to using heat and cold measures for being injury free. So we get to talk a lot about that, and we talk about the good and the bad with ice baths. And maybe, you know what, it's coming up to Christmas. You might be thinking, I'm going to get my other half an ice bath this year. Maybe you don't like them that much, but actually this podcast was the closest I ever came to going, you know what, I need an ice bath. So it's a lot of positives from using ice baths. But we also talked about it in that there's sometimes where you shouldn't use ice baths. Sometimes you don't need to be in them for like a half hour, 45 minutes. I think in this clip, Karen talks about the max you need to be in it. You shouldn't be any more than 10 minutes and maybe 11 minutes over the course of a week. And she talks about more details in the podcast. So I'm going to shut up and let the expert talk about it. This is Karen from Sealieve.ie talking to us back in April of obviously 2023. We're going to get a date for you now, just in case you want to listen to that episode, April 17th, 2023. Enjoy.
Everyone will do anything to take a vitamin or get into the ice bath, essentially, as long as you have the confidence to try something new.
100%. And like that confidence thing, that totally changed. You know, when you're saying there about training and stuff, like, or, you know, having like that edge. So when I started doing the cold therapy properly, I would say, you know, as in like going to do sea swims and going in the ice bath or whatever, those training sessions I do like for strength. And I mean, I'm only small, like I'm not lifting like heavy weight or anything, but the confidence, like you just feel, you know, when you're doing a rep and you're like, well, I've done that. Like I might have already been in the ice bath. It's not going to be ridiculously hard now. I can do difficult things. I'm not going to tell myself anymore that I'm not capable of doing, you know. So I think from a mental perspective, it really does something to your confidence. Like,
and that's that resilience. That's that. What's another rep? I've already been in there for 10 minutes. You know, like it's that another rep will actually might heat me up a little bit. You know, like it's taking that negative, putting a positive spin on it, and developing that resilience and that mentality, that rock solid mentality. It's absolutely brilliant.
Same when you're on your long runs. You know, you hit that wall, and you're like, no, I can do it. I can do another kilometer. It's in me.
Yeah.
So how cold is cold? Or does that depend on the person? Like you're talking there something about like Instagram and obviously people do things for likes and stuff. So they throw, you know, bags of ice, and somehow they're in front of a mountain with snow and stuff. It's like, that's the only way to do it. Like, but realistically, is there a point where it's this is cold enough, or is it when you feel cold, or?
There is actually so now it's confirmed, once it's under 15 degrees Celsius is considered cold therapy. So you don't need to be in single digits. Now you kind of go into a space then where it's you're probably in the bath longer. First of all, if you're going to, anywhere from 10 to 15, you probably need to be sitting in the bath for about 8 minutes, I'd say, to get the full benefit of it. But the colder it is, the faster it obviously happens. Yeah. But then I think you start to build up your tolerance for it, like you said. So now my minimum would be 5 minutes, just because I feel like, well, I know I can do it. So now I'm never going to go less than that, So it's not, it does depend.
We've seen you use the thermometer as well. So you mentally, 9, you can get that mental model straight away of like, no, I've been here before. It's 9 degrees. I've done 7. It was December. I did 1. I smashed the ice before I get in. So it's the same way as we use the Garmin. I've ran at a 440. I've done it. It's the same mental stamina you're building each time. And like, no, I can do this. And I did 5 minutes at colder, so maybe I'll stay till 8. And, naturally you're starting to get those benefits, even though the water is heating up.
Yeah, 100%. And there is a bit of a technique to it when you start doing it, because when you sit into it, if you're rigid, if you're sat there and your body is you're just like, okay, get it over with, counting the seconds, your body's going to start heating up the water around you. So when you're in it, you should aim to have like a gentle movement going. So so moving your legs a little bit, moving your hands a little bit, because you want that water, the same temperature water, to circulate around your body the whole time. You want to keep your shoulders under, you want to keep your hands under. If you're...
And this is one of the things.
Moving will make the water colder?
As in, it's not giving it a chance
as cold?
Yeah, because it'll heat up.
I'm never going to do that. So, warm up.
Yeah, Seán turns into a brick in any water he goes into. But I've heard that, and it's the same with survival techniques. You'll bunch together and hug each other, because water will create a layer on you, whether you think it or not. It'll create a thermal layer on you. It'll like that water that's that much away, like that 1 millimeter away, will start to heat up. Whereas if you can keep water moving and circulating, you're not giving it that chance to heat, so you're keeping it. But how do you get your hands in the water without crying? That is the $1 million question.
I cried in the bath yet? I haven't. I've cried training.
I will. I'm 6'4" and I'll admit I nearly cried in the Shannon. I put them in for 3 seconds and they were straight back out above my head. There is a sting, like it
it smacks. Yeah.
Like I don't know. Like my extremities are a lot longer than some other extremities, but the blood disappeared. It said, "No, we're out," and pins and needles was all that remained. Yeah. But how do you get out? What are your tips and tricks for someone like me who's going to take this up, but I'm afraid to get the hands in because it stings? What are the tips and tricks? Is it to just relax, keep them moving, focus on the flow of the water?
Honestly, Eric, I don't go in the sea in the winter without my gloves. And I love getting cold. So boots and gloves, if you're a sea swimmer, are an absolute must, I think, because you want to be able to stay in the water for longer. So if that's what's, and even wear a hat, it's not
the neoprene hats, yeah.
Yeah, like it's not that your hands or feet necessarily have to get cold. It's just your body. So it's just your core temperature coming down. So I would definitely I'd start off with your cold showers if you've never done it before. Build up to it. And then don't start in the winter. Obviously, we're coming into the summer now.
I have to now, because Logan Fisher did it Christmas Day. You're going.
Oh, I'm one of those losers. I've done that, although we do that on Christmas Eve. It's so sad, but you're like, I've done it. I got in the water on Christmas Eve. And Jay actually did it with me one year. Oh my God, I never forget it. You think you were about to cry. I never, ever saw him as stressed. He was like a toddler. He got in and then he was like, what have I done? It's straight out.
Yeah, and that's a man who can handle a lot of stress. So I very much share his pain at this moment in time. But it even shows those who can handle stress and so many other factors. Like Seán's going to do a 24-hour race. And people are like, that is bizarre. But Seán won't get in the water for 10 seconds and neither will I,
right.
you know. Like,
yeah.
And you know that I really thought, because you're endurance athletes, like I really thought that would be so up your alley because it's a mental game. You know, it really is.
It hurts us that we're not. We're not afraid to admit it, that we're afraid.
I have gone into the sea in Hoth in the summertime, all the way up to my ankles, and be like, no, get me out here. Too cold. And that is a straight up shoot. Like, that's the true story. The middle of August in the sea, and I'm looking around going, how are people doing this? And just the ankles are gone. When you're in the ice bath, I assume at some stage you start to shiver. Is that a sign that you need to keep going? And I don't know, for lack of a better term, toughen up and go with it? Or is that a sign, okay, you've gone too long to get out? Or does that mean anything at all? It's just you need to work more on your breathing?
No, you're bang on. There's like a sequence of there's a timeline for when you're in the bath.
Okay.
Or in any cold water. So those kind of first 10 to a minute, say, that's when you're in your fight or flight, you know, your adrenaline, your cortisol is up. When you're about a minute in is when your breathing starts to stabilize. So that's when you start to calm down a little bit. So if you can get over that initial hump, you're like, I can do anything for a minute.
You've never held a plank for a minute.
Then when you get over that, if you can hit like at 3 minutes is when your body will start to shiver. But then again, I know I keep saying about the nasal breathing, but you want to start doing it. Like, it's good that your body is shivering. It's supposed to shiver. It's not a sign that you should wrap it up, but you definitely shouldn't go past where you feel uncomfortable, you know. So that'll depend on your own body, but in or around 3 minutes, depending on the temperature, is when you will start to shiver. I would say no matter the temperature, cap it at 10 minutes. Like and I've done it myself. I've stayed in longer than 10 minutes myself. With, you know, a challenge with another guy, you know, the ego thing comes in and you're like, no, I can do it. I know I can do it. You do not need to do it. Nothing extra is going to happen for you. You know, cap it at 10. That's it. Done, dusted. And what you don't want to do is stay in. So genetically, some of us will have more brown fat than others. So I might be able you could tolerate more cold than me, say. So it would be foolish, me and you going in the bath at the same time, thinking that I can last longer than you, you know? Yeah. So know your boundaries. Like Eric, you were saying about the thermometer, like that's very much my gauge. Then I know, okay, I'm used to this temperature. I've built up to this. I know that I'm not going to go past a certain number of minutes, you know?
From there, we move on to, this was probably my most selfish episode of the podcast. So one of the reasons myself and Eric do this podcast is we get a lot of information off people smarter than us. And this episode was recorded the week of me doing my first ever backyard ultra. So we welcome back Dara O'Brien to the podcast. He's been on the podcast before when he set an FKT, fast known time, for doing the Barrow Way a couple of years ago. Myself and Eric were lucky enough to be with him on, I think we did 25k of that 120k he did that day. He's done ultramarathon events such as the Wicklow Way, and he'd done a backyard ultra twice before. Before recording this podcast, he was down at the Wexford Running Festival, and so basically he had 24 hours to accumulate as many kilometers as he could, and he came second that day. I don't have it offhand how many kilometers he gained on it. I don't want to guess in case I'm well off and Dara's listening and be like, here Seán, I got a lot more than that, or a lot less than that. So I can't remember the number, so I don't want to say number offhand here. But this for me was a really, really interesting listen, because I was able to take a lot of tips from this, and it was really cool that weekend when we did the backyard ultra, Dara was with me for my first 12 loops of that. And we actually, like, as we were talking to her, we had a couple of people going, oh, you guys are from the podcast and such. And they were like, oh, that tip with the socks or the runners, that was great advice and stuff like that. So if you're ever doing a backyard ultra or thinking about doing a backyard ultra, definitely come back and revisit this episode of the podcast. So we go straight into it with, I think we titled this one, the easiest way to do 100 miles in 24 hours. So you'll get more of an idea of what this podcast is about right about now. Dara, sometimes when we have people on the podcast, we've two ways to do something with a guest on the podcast. We either have myself and Eric a list of questions each, one of us a list of questions to ask you, or we ask one question and it goes from there. You are definitely going to be the latter in this podcast, because the one question is, how do you do 100 miles in 24 hours the Backyard Ultra? What is your advice?
Actually, I was thinking about that, and I wrote down a couple of things that I suppose maybe they're of interest, but they'll definitely be of interest to you, right? And so, like, it's an amazing format for people who want to do big miles, and there's no two ways around it. It's probably the most friendly format for running 100 miles in 24 hours, just the way that it's set up. The fact that everybody starts every loop in joint first position, because it doesn't matter how slow or fast you run the loop.
Last time, he'd be first.
Yeah. But
you get your shots in, Eric. You keep getting your shots in.
It is that kind of equalizer, and when you break it down, 6.7 kilometers in 1 hour isn't actually hard to do. It's just the kind of accumulation of it, and a lot of it is mental. The fact that you're back to the same place makes kind of crewing and eating very, very easy. You can have your stuff laid out. If you've got a crew there and you're speaking to them, they know roughly what time you're running the loop. So if you want something to drink, they should know where to put it on and all that kind of stuff. So it's really, really doable. But there's a couple of things to bear in mind, right? It is 100 miles if you go 24 hours, which is a long distance. It's 2 eco trails. And the other thing is there's 200 meters of elevation in that course. So that's 4,800 meters of climbing you'll have done as well, which is just kind of over half an Everest. So it's not an easy undertaking either. And the things that I think you really need to get right. And just a couple of thoughts off the top of my head, I guess. Pacing is really, really important. It's very easy when there's a group of 115 eager people, you're running, you're chatting with people. It's easy to get caught up in somebody else's pace. And if you go too quick, there's a couple of things happen. Number one, that kind of accumulation of miles begins to catch up with you, and it can catch up with you very, very quickly. You can go from feeling really good to kind of feeling pretty crap very quickly. And the second thing you need to think about is the quicker you get in, the longer you're going to be sitting on that seat, right? And in some ways that's okay because you have more time to sort yourself out. But you're in the Wicklow Mountains or the Dublin Mountains, it's possibly going to be chilly at night. The longer you're sitting in that seat, the colder you're getting and the more your legs seize up. So it's probably that balance that you strike between getting in with enough time to do what you need to do, but not to be sitting around, especially as the kind of hours tick on. So that pacing is really important, and you'll probably start identifying certain points in the course that you know what time you should be hitting those at. I should be hitting that at 10 minutes. I should be hitting that at 20 minutes. And picking your walking points as well, especially with a lot of kind of hills. It's a bit easier on hilly courses because you know automatically where to walk. On flatter ones, it can be a little bit more difficult. But get those walks in and stick to your time consistently. You may find, if you need to go to the toilet or something like that, you may find that you need to do a quicker loop because it's really, really strict. If you are not at that starting line on the dot of the hour, you are gone, right? If you're 5 seconds late, you're gone. You need to be in the starting corral, ready to go at the dot, or you're gone. And they'll show no mercy with that as well. It's a kind of standing rule of it. So that kind of timing thing is really, really important. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
100%. Just based off that, you're going, obviously 24 hours, long time. Did any stage when you're going through the night, did you think if I get back a little bit quicker, I might get like a 8-10 minutes shut eye with the legs up and that kind of thing? Did you do that, or did you go straight through without thinking about getting sleep or afraid to get sleep? You'll either miss that time or you'd be too groggy, or what way did you approach it, and would you change it?
So I did two. I did the first one last August, right? And then I did one in February as well, which was up in Florida Manor. So the North have these really great exotic sounding places, and you get there and it's just a lie because it's always freezing, right? So Florida Manor is nothing like Florida, and Florence Port is nothing like anywhere in Italy either. But I didn't like. I've always been. I enjoy running through the night. I get a bit of a buzz from it, and I don't tend to feel tired. So I think I did 24 hours on the first one. I went out on loop 6 in February. And on both times I was kicking myself afterwards, which is really something else I'll speak to you. Yeah. I did a couple of quick laps, but it's because I needed to go to the Portaloo, right? And I prefer to get in, go to the toilet, and then have time rather than. Now, most courses have toilets either side of the starting corral as well. So you can come in and you can go to the toilet, or you can start a loop and go and make the time up. But, sometimes you don't want to be chasing time either. So that was the only time I went quicker, and I was running maybe kind of 43, 44 minute loops on that. Every other time I was in around kind of 52, 53 minutes, and I was trying to stick to that. If you go kind of further in, do you want to get a bit of shy? Possibly. Like, I'd imagine if you're hitting that kind of 36, 40 hours, you're going to try and need to get some kind of nap on the seat. And again, you're always going to have a trade-off, right? Because you got a certain amount of energy. Do you use that energy to try and get a nap and maybe repay more energy than you used? Or do you keep going? And I think everybody's a bit different on that,
Makes sense.
I think really important as well is non-negotiables, right? You probably have to set some non-negotiables, some rules. And some of the ones from speaking to runners that kind of do this a lot and are pretty good at it. Some people set a non-negotiable like, I'm not going to quit at nighttime. So no matter what happens, I'll make it through the night. I'll wait until it's kind of bright and I'll make my decisions as to whether I stop then. Because you can view, when the sun comes up, you can get a bit of a burst of energy. Other things, don't quit on your seat, right? If you are on your seat and you're back and you've made your loop, no matter what happens, get up, walk to that corral and start the next loop. So I guess kind of my saying is always to myself, quit on your feet and not in your seat. If you're going to go out because you're timed out and you can't make the loop in an hour. Don't go out because you couldn't be arsed getting up off your seat and then kick yourself the whole way because you could have done another loop. Because every loop is only 6.7 kilometers and you still have a full hour to make it. So most often it's in your head. And when I was thinking about your goal, one of the challenges I give to you is your goal really 24 hours? Because if your goal is really 24 hours, I can almost guarantee that as soon as you hit that 24th loop, you're going to quit. Whether you feel, because it's mental. It's mental.
Not if I'm standing there.
I have thought that. I agree with you on that. Is it really 24 hours? No, because I don't know what my body is capable of. But I've had the amount of, yourself when you're running, you're thinking about it. It's like, what happens 24 hours? It's like, okay, 24 hours, you give one more. It's always been thought process. And I didn't want to say it in the podcast, but it would be. If I get 24, it'd be like, right, one more. Let's make sure it wasn't, a lucky 24 or say that and you quit and you're done. And see where the legs are at from there is the goal. I've been pessimistic by saying that in the podcast just because 24 itself is a very, very daunting task that like when I did the Eco Trail, I didn't do a great time on that. Like I finished 11 hours, 24 minutes. And that is almost the equivalent of halfway in terms of time and distance that I would do if I did it doing a backyard ultra. And like my legs weren't able for much more that time. Like I spent that night in the pub for his 30th and I was just sitting there not doing a whole hell of a lot. So I'm like, Jesus, could I have gone out and done another 80K? And if you ask me then, it's like, no, I don't think I could have done another. Like I was that sore that I remember when I did that, one of my mates was joking with me. He was like, kind of like what Eric did me for the 4:48. He was saying that, well, you not just do the extra 4K and say you did double marathon distance or whatever it was. I was like, you know what, I'm going to do 80K and then I'll come back and get that extra 4K. And I can't remember why it was 4K. It was reason 84 or something. But anyway, or was it two? I can't remember what it was.
Two marathons, I think.
Two marathons. Yeah, sorry. It is two marathons. So it was like two marathons in. But when I got back to the house, like I could barely move and like I could barely finish my food. I wasn't even that hungry. And I was like, well, there's no way I'm getting 4K in now. I'm totally done. So with that in my mind, I'm like, I don't know if I can do 24. But you are right. 24 is not 24. If I walk away saying I got 24, I'd be delighted. But I want the mindset when I get to 24 thinking, now what?
Yeah, it's one of those things, I'm into that kind of behavioral stuff. And I think that things like, it's an arbitrary number, right? It's attractive because it's a round number. It's 100 miles. Yeah. Yeah. But really, it doesn't mean anything other than the fact that you just happen to pick that as the goal. And the first backyard that I did, there were like 9 people finished 24 hours, right? 3 people started 25 and the winner took it on 27. And I was going home kicking myself because I went up there with the mindset of saying I want to do 100 miles in 24 hours. And because I was feeling a bit tired and I was thinking about the drive home, when I was done, I was like, okay, I'm done. Just still 8 or 9 people. And next thing I looked up and only 3 of them were gone off. And one of them turned straight back. 2 of them did 26 and the winner took it on 27.
I saw the winner did the 27 in 36 minutes, like an incredible time. But when I looked it up, I was just assuming this was going to be 30, 35, 40, some insane out of reach number. And then when I got 26, I'm like, is that because of it's the highest elevation? They're calling one of the toughest backyards in the world? Or was it the case of you had a lot of people doing it going 24 hours? Like, are you expecting the winner this time going a lot more than 26, 27 laps? Or are you expecting a similar thing? Or have you even thought about that?
I don't know. I know there's a couple of runners that I'm aware of on there that have done reasonably big numbers. So I think Givi Tolentino he's there on the starting list. Now he's also running in the Backyard Masters in Rettert in Germany, where I think Keith Russell ran 96 laps there the last year and hallucinated in a forest and finally kind of quit. And the winner went on with 97. Givi has kind of 65. He won the Irish World Championships last year with 65 loops in brutal weather, and a multiple Spartathlon finisher, which is 250-mile race in Greece. So he's a serious dude, and if he's there, I expect that he will be within the last 2. Right. And there's not a huge amount of quit in the man at all. I think Cathal McParland was the guy who won it last year. And he's a seriously strong runner as well. He's very decent ultra runner as well. I don't know a huge amount more about the field. There's another guy, Vincent McMath, who I've run beside in a couple of backyards, and he's fairly solid and fairly dogged as well. But I think the elevation is going to be a tester for a lot of people. I think the other thing is last year was the first one kind of down south, so it's probably it's a relatively new format. And it's definitely a new format down south. The North have been doing it for quite a while. But down south, I'd say there's a lot of kind of interest now because of the World Masters and the World Championship, and the format seems to be taken off. But yeah, I don't know. You'll generally find that when you hit kind of the 50K mark, there'll be people drop out. The 100K mark, people will drop out. And it's because that's their goal and they're happy with what they've achieved. And you tend to notice kind of once that 100-kilometer mark ticks over, you'll notice a lot fewer people at the start line as well. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. And there's always a few dark horses that nobody's really kind of heard of that just kind of bust numbers out of it from nowhere as well. So I think it'll definitely be interesting, you know. And any other bits?
I'm just kind of thinking, you've given us great insights into the goals, into the mentality of it, the psychology of it. And that's, let's be honest, the biggest player. The body will do what the body's going to do, but mentally you can keep going. How does Seán set up a plan? Okay, he has his individuals, but how do you set up a plan for food? How do you set up a rent? Like, don't sit in the chair more than 5 minutes. Don't walk backwards towards the toilet. You know, like, is there certain little snippets that he can go, listen, no more than 6 minutes, just based on your experience, that are going to get him through to at least a 24?
Yeah, I think some of that is a real personal question because everybody's different, especially with fueling, right? But you know, you're going to go from feeling really great and having kind of great time and great chats with people and feeling kind of brilliant about being part of this, especially at the start. There's a great buzz. It will definitely suck at some stage, but the suck will pass because it never kind of always gets worse. So if you can tell yourself that and say, listen, if I can just push through, do another lap, get back, eat something, get my head right, do another lap, you'll eventually find that you'll kind of push through that. How much you want to push through it, I think, is the thing. You need probably to start eating and drinking small amounts right from the very first lap, because you don't want to find yourself in a position where you're trying to kind of overeat to catch up on calories. And you know, because you're not going extremely fast, it's quite easy to maintain on top of your fueling if you start right from the start. It's kind of when you burn calories and you leave a few loops without eating anything, and then your body starts kind of crashing. So I would say you probably have to pack for all eventualities. You need some sweet stuff. You need some savory stuff. You probably want some hot stuff. Depending on how strong your body clock is, you probably want something that feels a bit breakfasty, even a cup of coffee or something when the sunrise is coming up. You might want to eat something warm at nighttime, a pot noodle or something like that. The rest of the times you might just be kind of grazing. But I eat a lot of sandwiches that I wouldn't normally eat if I was kind of in the Wicklow Way, something like that, because you tend not to kind of have time. You're looking for fast stuff. But you have a little bit more time to sit down at a table. So, I mean, the things that you normally like to eat, they're the kind of things that I'd bring. And then you've got plenty of kind of sugary stuff that you can have a bit of a sugar hit with. Things like Red Bull or caffeinated drinks might give you a bit of a boost through the evening. And then I wouldn't underestimate water. Like, there's an awful lot of people that I've met that drink a lot of Tailwind, drink a lot of kind of electrolytes and neglect the water. And you find soon that kind of your stomach can begin to kind of bog up a bit if you're constantly drinking Tailwind and constantly drinking electrolytes. I mean, 6.7 kilometers in an hour isn't tremendously fatiguing on the body. You don't need to be drinking electrolytes all the time or Tailwind all the time when you're eating solid food as well. So sometimes a bit of water just kind of helps settle things down. So that's definitely kind of that selection of stuff. And the other thing is speak to your crew. If you're going to do a fast lap because you need to go to the toilet, tell them. Say, look, I want to come in 48 minutes. Will you have a cup of coffee? Because there's nothing a bit more frustrating than really looking forward to something and you get in and it's too hot and you can't drink or eat, and next thing the whistles are going and you're like, oh crap, I've got to get back out. And then kind of you're a bit thrown out of sorts because you didn't get what you want. So I suppose a bit of communication on that side, lots of choice to eat from, because you can set up a full table, you can bring as much stuff as you want. Something warm that's easy just to pull over you when you're sitting in the seat at nighttime, because you don't want to be kind of shivering and not being able to get warm, but you don't necessarily want to have to be kind of stripping tight clothes off either when you hear the whistle going. So something nice and kind of loose and warm that you can just bung on you. And the change of shoes as well. And especially if you've got two different types of pairs of shoes, because you can often find that you start getting hot spots, and even just a change of shoes can kind of transfer the stress to another part of the foot with a different pair of runners, and it just gives that break before you start getting blisters and things like that. So kind of preventative stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was wondering why the change of shoes, actually. When you put it like that, it makes a lot of sense. So like, how much in detail are you going with would you have a lot for your crew before this event, and you'd have a table all set up with food, or what? Or they just you just have like, how rigid are you with your crew? Like, is it like timetable out, or?
Yeah, no, I like, to be honest, the two that I've had, I haven't really had a crew for them. I've gone up myself. There's been guys that are kind of running that are there, and their crew have kind of always just offered, listen, do you want me to have anything on? But the guys that I know that have done well because they work closely with their crew. I just can't find anybody who'll tolerate me for long enough to actually want to crew with me for 24 hours. So I do have a crew coming up for this one.
Good. I'm just wondering at what point Seán's going to ask me if I'm free for 24 hours in a week or two.
Oh, well, if you stick around when we hit the stop button on the podcast.
I know your missus isn't going to do it anyway, so what are you going to do, Seán?
She said she's dropped me off. She'd pick me up at 24 hours and I better still be running.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not coming home. And for our final clip of this week's episode of the Any Given Runday Podcast, we bring you back to August of this year, where we had a chat with Keith Russell as he was preparing towards his World Championship Backyard Ultra out in Tennessee. In this clip, though, we talk about coming back from injury. I just thought it was something different, whether you're listening to this and maybe, like myself, you kind of got stuck in the rut after the Dublin Marathon. It's hard to get back in the wagon and get back running again. This one's a great episode for getting motivated to get back into your training. And Keith talks about soon after assisting the world record in Germany in 2022, he got 89 hours. So for those unfamiliar with Backyard Ultras, the only way you get to a world record is if you have someone getting one lap less, because to win the race, you have to do one lap by yourself. You can't say, oh, I feel good, and keep going, do laps towards a world record. So you actually need someone that almost catches it, but obviously doesn't, to get that world record. So Keith assisted in 2022, got 89 hours, and obviously the winner got 90. He went on to represent Ireland at the 24-hour World Champions, the European Championships, and then from there he did the Dublin Marathon and got injured. So I picked this episode just because personally I got really stuck into a rut. If you saw Instagram this week, you'd see I had different Advent, Christmas challenges, stuff like that, just for myself, try and get back on track, and maybe might help one or two other people. Now, having said that, if you have a coach and stuff already coaching you through, you're feeling you're good, you're training, keep doing that. But for me, I just wanted a different challenge to end the year, so I'm doing now 1k a day up to 24k, so give me 300k and get my mileage right back up again. Could backfire with how much I bring up the mileage, but we'll see on that one. Anyway, back to Keith. So he talks about doing a Dublin Marathon after that and just being that step too far, getting injured and coming back from injury to build himself back up to the World Championship. So you're going to hear this clip from Keith, and after that then, that is this week's episode of the Any Given Runday Podcast. Thanks again for listening. I'm going to leave you with Keith. Take care.
And I'm actually, as I said, I'm training Pacific as well. So I have at night outside my house, like I have literally a straight road for 3.4k, and I turn and come back 3.4k, and I just sit in my car for 10 minutes and go again. My neighbours must think I'm crack going on.
Even the guards just drive past you now going,
that's Keith.
Leave him alone.
So
he's on night patrol. That's it. That's Aircom phone.
Neighborhood watch is just Keith. So you went from May doing the backyard masters, then in September you represented Ireland at the European Championships. So that's just a throwaway compared to everything you've done. And that's where you did the 246k.
Yes.
You then did Dublin again in 2022. And you were talking to us right before the podcast. And that's when I was like, Keith, you have to stop talking. We're recording this. I want to hear more about it. You shouldn't have done Dublin. Why?
No, I shouldn't have done Dublin. And so when I finished in Germany, I was very disappointed with how it got on. It's my first ever DNF on my record. Coming second in, and like being an assist to a world record. I was disappointed for a few different reasons. I think mainly because I feel I gave up. I feel I quit. And that really, really grinded on me, for a long period of time. And I think I just had to come to realization that it's a learning curve. And, you're one of two people in the world to ever do something like this. I'm not an egotistical person, but to get your mind around this, to get yourself back to training again, you have to find some solace in what you've done. Do you know what I mean? So it's the only thing is with ultra running, you don't get too many a year. You have to wait a period of time before you get to go again. But when I finished in Germany, I had an email to say that I'd made it onto the Irish 24-hour team. So again, it was a massive boost. But the problem was that it was such a short space of time. So it was September. So I had to get myself back in, like get recovered and back into running shape again. But it was obviously for a 24-hour race. It was the European Championships. But yeah, I started to struggle after the backyard. I started to get issues with my hip. But again, I thought it was just because it'd gone so long. Thought just things were just starting to tighten up, you know what I mean? So the main thing was to get through the 24-hour, and then I'd be able to sort it out. Like I had loads of time then to do whatever. But I did. I got through the 24-hour, but I was in serious pain come the last couple of hours. Again, I couldn't walk after it. Like I'd say 2 or 3 days before I could even walk again. And that was purely like, obviously after running for 24 hours, your legs are sore, but my hip was very, very sore. But yeah, like that was an incredible experience, like to represent your country. Like you go through the whole process of, you go out, you walk behind the Irish flag, you're with some of the best ultra runners in Ireland and the world. I was there for the world record. The new 24-hour world record was set at 330k. Alexander Sorokin, you know what I mean? Numerous country records were broken. Our own Irish record was broken by Ed McGorty at 258 kilometres, the furthest anyone has ever ran for Ireland. You know, and I was finished second to the Irish, you know, and so all in all, it was an incredible experience, incredible day. And, you know, I hope to do it again someday.
And why not Dublin then? I want to ask Keith, because were you driven in because if you don't do Dublin, you lose your ticket for the next year?
Lottery anymore. No, I tell you, I done Dublin purely because I done it with Alana the very first time I done it. So I swore this would always be a race that I do regardless. I knew going into doing Dublin, I shouldn't have done it. But again, my ego probably had the better of me, and I went out and I was running sub-3 marathon pace up to mile 7, and I had to stop and take a Solfadine at mile 7, and I limped for 19 miles. I was in agony for 19 miles. Yeah.
Yes.
And that set you up. That was your latest injury that you've recovered from now, and now it's After that, I had to stop running. After that, I got an MRI, so I had a stress fracture in my femur. And I'd say it was sort of happened probably before the 24-hour, and it was just got progressively worse. And the more I ran on it, the worse it got. And by the time I got the MRI, it was nearly healing again. So I had a race planned, and I literally done a train and run. I got a phone call to stop running. I ran 50k in the mountains, and I got a phone call the next day to say, stop running. You have a stress fracture. No, about 50k into a run. Yeah.
So I had to pull up on that. So yeah, I didn't run for, I'd say, about 6 months. And so this is where issues start to arise because of I used running as a coping mechanism for, say, coping with the death of my daughter. That's when sort of the mental health starts to take a massive dip. You know, I couldn't run. I was in the gym all the time, but things start to play on your mind. Do you know what I mean? That you're not going to run again. You're going to lose this. You're going to miss this. You're going to, do you know what I mean? Nearly like you're like, you know, you've done all this, and what you do it all for? You didn't cope with life the way you should have coped with it. And, you know, so you sort of look at all this, and I suppose I had to sort of look at everything that I was doing and not running to the point of hurting myself, you know. And I think, you know, you have stress on your body, you have stress, everybody has stress. The more I suppressed it, it was going to come out somehow. And it came out in the form of a stress fracture. Lucky enough, it was the form of a stress fracture. It could have been something way worse. Do you know what I mean? So I think in the last 6 months that when I wasn't running, I was able to start to look at addressing sort of things in my life that I needed to address. And going back running now, I feel a lot better going back running, a lot better headspace going back running. And I'm running for the right reasons. For myself, for Alana, and it's not really, you know, to show people how good I am or show, oh, I can do this and I want to be the best at this. I'll do the best I can, and that's good enough for me, and it's good enough for the people that are around me and the people that want me to do well. Do you know what I mean? It's not, you know, people have this perception like I have to go out and I have to win. I always had that. You know, it's the nature of a sport, of doing a sport. But at the same time, you still have to be happy with how you do, because the race itself is just the end line. It's the process from when you start training right the way through. That's what you have to enjoy. And if you're not enjoying that, you have a serious problem.
Do you have
I'm not enjoying this Ironman training, Keith.
Did those 6-7 months away give you a... You know, I know there are memes and stuff you see on Instagram about like running for my mental health and stuff like that. But taking those 6 months away and then stepping back from just going from race to race and the same race you're doing, and now come back with a different perspective. Do you have a different outlook of what running does for you mentally, that you need something else as well? Or how do you look at it?
No, I seen that I don't take enough time for myself. So my life was like 100 mile an hour, you know, so you're working, you're training, you're getting home to eat, to go to sleep, to do it all over again. And that's the way it was Monday to Sunday. Right. You had no time for yourself. There was no being able to sit on your own or read a book or sit with your thoughts so I think because I couldn't run, I had this fear of being on my own. Do you know what I mean? And that's the toughest part of, like, you feel like you have nobody. You feel like lonely. And like ultra running, training, it's a lonely sport because, the lads will come out and run with me for a few hours and then I keep training and then they'll come out another time. And it's that's the nature of the sport that you're in. But if you let it get into you, it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, like fucking nobody. Like, do you know what I mean? But yeah, that's the way it is. But like, yeah, it's sort of, once you're happy, you can be happy with yourself. And once you can sort of sit with yourself and you sit in solitude, as I call it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to be lonely. You want to be living in solitude, And
it is one thing, and I've never gone to the depths you've gone through, but through busy times, it's the downtime. Like, being on my own on a cycle or a run is grand because I'm doing something. I can get off the bike and go, there's a Strava that says I achieved something there today, and I can take something in that fact. It's when there's nobody around and I'm on the couch for a rest day and you're just tapping the hands and going, oh, I'm wasting a day. I don't know. Like, learning to sit in your hands is probably the hardest task for busy people.
Absolutely. You see, but if you're sitting at home and it says in your training plan, don't train today or something light, if I wasn't doing something, you feel like you're losing distance, you're losing fitness, you're losing something, you're not doing enough. But that's your inner voice to tell you you're just not doing enough, where you're so used to on the go all the time. So yeah, it's an art in itself to work that. And I started to take, say, one day that I do not train whatsoever, but the night before I nearly wake up with anxiety going, you have to train, you have to train, you have to train. Whereas like you're going, it's actually work out better for me by not training because it's given me myself that time to rest and recover.
So it's a fine art, yeah, it absolutely is. And I feel it myself. If I don't train for 2 days, I think, here I go, starting again.
Yeah. You're on a downward slope, like, you feel like, I've let myself go.